Soldiers taking selfies on top of their armored vehicles.
Yeah, and you know what? No one cares. Nobody
No one
cares.
cares.
Nobody. Any attempt by this loser to play off the West against Russia is going to have only one consequence, that our situation is going to get worse.
We will get stomped.
Yeah, because Russia knows very well that we have nowhere to go.
Hello and welcome to the Armenian News Network Groong Week in Review. This show was recorded on Sunday, August 28th, 2022. I'm Asbed Bedrossian. I'm here with Hovik Manucharyan this week. Before we begin the show, we'd like to request that you subscribe to our YouTube channel and follow us on Twitter. We're very active on Facebook, both as a group and a page. Also, subscribe and rate our podcasts, which you can listen to wherever you get your podcasts. All our Groong links are on our Linktree page. We'll make sure you can find that on all of our profile pages, so you can click on that and find us on all social media platforms. So if you like our shows, please share them with your friends and follow us everywhere you are used to getting your news. Thanks. On with the show. Here are the major topics we'll touch on today. Opposition movement restarts with Edgar Ghazarian. Berdzor and Aghavno are handed over to the Azeris. Is a peace plan coming? And mandatory military service is undercut yet again. To talk about these issues, we have with us Dr. Arthur Khachikyan, who is an international relations expert from Stanford University specializing in intervention. He currently teaches at the Russian Armenian University in Yerevan. Hello and welcome to the show for the first time, Arthur. We're very glad to have you on the show.
Thanks.
Welcome, Arthur.
Okay, in early August, the resistance movement, which is led mainly by the parliamentary opposition, Hayastan and I Have Honor factions, declared a temporary moratorium on their street protests, citing mainly the need to build up an infrastructure that will help institutionalize the movement. They announced last week that their next major protest is going to be on September the 2nd. In the meantime, Edgar Ghazarian, Armenia's former ambassador to Poland and a former chief of staff at the Constitutional Court, declared a new, apparently independent effort aptly named the Independence Movement to unseat Pashinyan. Ghazarian and the people in the Hamakhambum consolidation movement, which is associated with 5165, have been generally supportive of the resistance movement, and Ghazarian, as well as Avadik Chalabian, who is also a member of Hamakhambum, have participated in many of the past protests. Ghazarian's self-organized protest rally on August 23rd drew thousands of people. The symbolic date chosen by Edgar Ghazarian for his protest is the date of Armenia's declaration of independence from the Soviet Union in 1990. We spoke at length to Ghazarian about his plans and about the significance of August 23 and Armenia's declaration of independence. Look up our episode number 159 on our YouTube channel for our interview with Mr. Ghazarian, which is in Armenian, by the way, not in English. Arthur, what do you think about the movement so far and the new initiative by Edgar Ghazarian?
Well, first of all, let me start by saying that the situation in Armenia and in the Armenian community abroad is dire. I think we're seeing probably the worst crisis, the worst condition we've been in probably since 100 years. I don't think our country has been in this kind of a situation since 1920. I think that most people in Armenia they do understand how dangerous and critical the situation is, but a lot of them they've lost all hope. There's a general sense of apathy, hopelessness, and despair. I think most people in Armenia understand that we have been led into this crisis by an incompetent group of people, utterly incompetent, unbalanced, irrational group of people who destroyed whatever diplomatic leverage Armenia had, made horrific mistakes with our foreign policy, provoked this war, lost this war, and now continuing to lead us down this path. And I want you to be very clear about this. You mentioned that we're celebrating, quote unquote, independence from the Soviet Union. It is largely a fiction. It was a fiction back then, where we never really were an independent country, provided that most of our needs were taken care of by another state, such as protecting our borders and ensuring our security. But now we have moved even further away from being an independent country or being a country at all. It seems that just like back 200 years ago, 300 years ago, as always, Armenians are begging foreign governments to protect them, ensure their security. We are not an independent state. We're a protectorate. We're a Russian protectorate right now, and this is a disastrous outcome, not only of the last 4 years. To be fair, it's not just this group that is responsible for it, but of course, particularly the last 4 years have brought us to this disaster. But of course, the misgovernance of previous decades. So we're right now in a condition of a complete implosion. The Armenian society has imploded. People have lost all hope. We need to be very, very clear about what's happening. There is no need to embellish it. We thought that we had a state, an army, diaspora, leadership. Now we're clear we do not have a state. We do not have an army. I wonder what we mean when we say a diaspora, because diaspora also proved that it's difficult to organize and not very effective. So it's a total implosion and despair. This is what we're going through. We were talking about some villages. The issue is not 2 or 3 villages between Armenia and Karabakh. The issue is not even Karabakh. The issue is that very soon Turkey and Azerbaijan will push again for that corridor over the southern region of Armenia, after which Turkey will have its paw, so to speak, on Armenia, on the southern province of Armenia. This corridor will be declared, as I said, for over a year, and already has been declared a vital zone for the Turkic world. So now Turkey has a legitimate pretext for using military force anytime it wants, if Armenians ever try to claim back their southern province of Sumik. So it's not just Karabakh, it's not just villages, it's now Armenia itself. And we're now in a complete encirclement by Turkey, Azerbaijan. And owing to this government in particular, we have destroyed our relationship with what was considered to be our ally, our strategic ally. And sadly for us, this strategic ally is now drifting towards Turkey. There is an overlap of interests with Turkey in view of the war in Ukraine. And Turkey, of course, is much more important to them than we are. And in the absence of any competent diplomacy, having ruined our diplomacy, we have no tools to defend ourselves and to make sure that Russia doesn't go too far down the road of concessions. And we have no leverage.
Under the circumstances, Arthur, what can the opposition do?
Well, this regime certainly needs to be replaced, but there are deeper processes that have taken place in Armenia. You need to understand that in the last 30 years, as I have been saying for the last 30 years, the society has imploded. The educational system in the country has collapsed. The expert community, so-called elites, the intelligentsia, they have largely migrated. They have been replaced with widespread incompetence. Armenia has lost its industry, has lost its science, largely lost its intellectual circles, its students. This year, there's a famous number was published. There's one single student who has applied to the agricultural agricultural university in Europe. Mm-hmm. One applicant. It's a country that has lost its brain power. We have been destroyed educationally and intellectually. So there's little wonder that some people continue to support this group, because they are just as uneducated and incompetent as their supporters, but they continue to support them. They have a certain base in Armenia, because people, not just their supporters, but the wider part of this public, they think that these people are bad, they are incompetent, they have no experience, and they led us to this disaster. But the previous regime is worse. This is the kind of thinking that Armenians have gotten themselves into. that yes, we're losing our country, we're losing our people, we're going to lose this enclave in Karabakh. We're ready to give up 150,000 compatriots, just surrender them to Azerbaijan. All of that is fine as long as we don't return to the previous regime, because the previous regime was corrupt. This kind of an argument is supported by a large part of the Armenian public, which only shows you how far we have gone down this path of intellectual degeneration. And I think we need to be very clear. So there are people who would rather surrender the country to Turkey than bring back the previous regime. You need to be very clear about this, because when you talk to people about what's happening around them, village by village, soldier by soldier, we're moving further and further down this catastrophe. We're waiting for Moscow and Ankara to decide what Armenia will look like, if we're going to have Zangezur, Kapan, Goris. We're waiting to see what will they decide for us. Mm-hmm. And people are not concerned about that. You need to understand it. People are not concerned about that. Most people in Yerevan continue frequenting restaurants and cafes. You hear loud music. You hear dancing.
Well, they did so during the 44-day war.
That I'm going to delegate to you on that, because thankfully I haven't heard. There was a big movement of solidarity in Armenia. A lot of people have helped. A lot of people volunteered to go to the war, but then it all collapsed like a bubble.
I was here, and people were frequenting cafes, and you couldn't tell there was anything happening. If you look at if you were in Cascade, right, in Yerevan. But Arthur, we have, obviously we have focused on these issues over the last 2 years on our podcast. Every week we sort of try to bring our listeners this information. And I think we largely, at least speaking for myself, I largely agree with you on the assessment. And I think we can assume that many people who listen to us also agree with you. But, what is the path forward, if there is anything? I mean, maybe it's very difficult. Maybe it's sort of,
how
maybe
do
you
we
think
turn
it's impossible.
it around, basically?
There's a group of people who did not vote for this government, who voted for the opposition, which has in the past shown that they can generate some numbers in the street, maybe not a critical mass some people would require. But given what we have as an opposition, what do you see as a series of steps they can take to, let's say, I'm assuming that sort of, the first thing that needs to be done, if we want to save Armenia, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, is to get rid of this government. If you agree, and that is the stated goal for the opposition. Yeah. So that is the stated goal for the opposition. How would you assess their failure so far? Is it catastrophic? Is it recoverable? And what do you think their next step should be?
The people in Armenia that I talk to, they all say one thing, and many of them say one thing. We don't want this government, and we don't want these people either, because we've seen them before. What we need is a new person. There is a need for a new movement, new people who have not been involved in this corruption scheme of the previous regime. And I think this latest movement, gentleman,
Edgar Ghazarian,
yeah, I think he could be that person. But they need to work on their strategy, because just asking people to come out to the streets, this has been going on for many years. Somehow this person who's going to go unnamed, somehow he managed to change a government, but just by taking to the streets and confusing everyone and deceiving everyone and leading all of us to believe that he's going to improve things. After which we found ourselves in the worst situation in 100 years. But what is needed is a new person. Whether or not this person is credible, as long as he doesn't have any ties to the previous regime, and he has some record to be credible, I for one support him. The trick is now to overcome this apathy. People have lost hope. Most people have lost hope. They just don't even want to bother anymore. Somehow we need a new person, and we need to overcome this, because Armenia now is in damage control mode. All we can do is minimize the damage that's been done by this war, by this horrible regime the last 4 years, by the previous 30 years of mismanagement, corruption, things that I have been screaming about, and Asbed would remember me, because I've been screaming about this for 30 years and no one would listen. No one would listen. I remember writing a blog in 2016 warning that the war will be coming back. This war is coming back. Azerbaijan is going to come back because they found our weak spots. They know where to invest now. They know that we can't fight with their drones. They're going to do this. I personally sent these warnings to the Ministry of Defense. No one would listen. Armenians don't like listening to each other. They all know everything. It's our national trait. We all know everything. We're experts. Yeah.
Arthur, I want to sort of get to this argument that as long as it's not someone is not associated with the previous regime, that's very relative, right? Because I don't think that you can have a leader who is ready to lead Armenia, who has not served in one capacity or another in the past in the leadership. For instance, Edgar Ghazarian himself, he was from 2008 to 2014, I believe, a member of the Republican Party, but not because sort of he needed that. I think he explained that he was a person with conservative viewpoints. How do you define what is someone not associated with the former regime?
Anytime people hear the name Robert, Serge, anytime they hear these names, most people express profound disillusionment and hatred. They hate them. They hate them. And they're blinded by it.
It's almost like society has a PTSD with this issue.
It does.
Do they hate them more than Nikol Pashinyan?
They hate them more than they hate this loser. They hate them more. They hate a person with all his fault. They call him a murderer. I don't know if it's true. Has Robert murdered anyone? And when we speak of murder, they usually mention a few names of people he allegedly murdered. I don't know whether this is true or not. Armenians like to tell fairy tales. It's possible or it's not possible. I don't know. But they think that it's worse to have murdered a few political opponents years ago than to have killed 5,000 young men for no reason and surrendered our country and humiliated all of us and broken our back. They think that is much worse. What Robert has done is much worse than what this guy has done. It's again, it shows you the degree of intellectual decay that has taken place in this society.
All right, let me ask another question though, and then we can go to the next topic. But procedurally, Armenia, like if you really want to change constitutionally the government, there are a few things that could be done, right? One is to call for Pashinyan's resignation, which was the focus of Ghazarian's rally last week, and that was not successful. And that has been the call for the opposition all this time. I guess a criminal case could be initiated against him by the prosecutor, but that has always been an option. And I don't think in the next few days, before the end of his term, which is August 31st, Artur Davtyan is going to do that. And the third and only way left is for impeachment proceedings in the parliament. And it seems like that Ghazarian is a proponent of this move, and he's basically trying to convince the rest of the opposition to support his move because they have seats in the parliament, and they would need at least 30% of the seats to launch the impeachment proceedings, and they would need more than 50%, I think, to vote for impeachment. So he's also assuming that 20% of the Armenian parliament who are supporters of Nikol Pashinyan or who are part of the civil contract faction will, turn coats, essentially.
Or they'll peel off and vote for impeachment.
How realistic do you think the scenario is? And in your opinion, is there any other way that this movement can move forward? Some people have said like that having the necessary number of people, a critical mass on the streets is the only way, and that the existing opposition has not done that. And Edgar Ghazarian himself last week, he had 4,000 people by the most liberal estimates. So what do you think? What do you think needs to happen, essentially?
Well, let's start eliminating some options. Many people, many leaders have called for this person's resignation. I'm not even going to name him. He did not budge. He did not have the dignity of leaving. He admitted that it was his fault that 5,000 people died and we lost the war, and he did not have the dignity of apologizing or resigning. His gang, those people who are with him in the parliament, they're not going to change their side or turn codes because they're under his direct control. I've heard from some people who worked with him. He is just as tyrannical as he is ridiculous. This guy is running this group by basically calling people and screaming at them and making no sense. As you know, he doesn't even have any education, no training. All he knows is, to come up with ideas as they come to him and then call his people and start yelling at them. So I do not see them changing ranks in the parliament. I don't think it's realistic. What I proposed to this movement, not this movement, but some of the leaders of the opposition movement, is a systematic study of why do people support this guy still after the 4 years of unimaginable catastrophe. They still support him. To ask the right questions, get the right answers, and find out why do they still support him. To do a very systematic public opinion poll, and really study the questions that we're asking and the answers we're getting. Nobody listens. Nobody wants to do it because we still don't know where does his support come from.
And there needs to be an honest assessment of this too.
There needs to be an honest assessment. It's not in Yerevan. It's not in Yerevan. The majority of people in Yerevan voted against him. It's coming from the villages. Mm-hmm. It's coming from people who lack education, just like he does, and who think emotionally.
And are from a low socioeconomic bracket.
It's the rule of the mob. It's the rule of the mob. Let's be very clear. This is not the time to be politically correct. I don't care to be politically correct. I'm going to tell you how it is. It's the mob that supports him because it identifies itself with this person. Yes, he's just like us. He lies, on the lawn, looking like a junkie, drinking wine, passing out. We love him because he's just like us. Those are the kind of arguments you hear. And you need to be very clear about the people who support him.
There are many rumors that actually that image was not, an accident. It's specifically crafted to appeal to those, the masses. That image with him lying on the lawn with the wine bottle.
To the mob. Also, you need to know that he's managing his supporters. He must have some advisors who are helping him do this, because there is a network of people and they're connected either via social media or messenger or whatever. When he says something and usually just thinks of something in the morning, his ideas are completely random, you know him. When he thinks something in the morning, in the evening, I hear the exact same phrases from some of my relatives who are still associated with him. I have some people who are associated with him. So whatever he says in the morning, word for word, they repeat to me in the evening. So this network works. He distributes these messages. There are people who are advising him how to manipulate this mob, and it works. It's very efficient. Only in Armenia would you accept the argument that, yes, this government of the last 4 years lost the war and destroyed our diplomacy, but it's not their fault. It's the fault of the previous regime. Only in our country is it possible to people to even consider such an argument. And it is largely due, like I said, to the collapse of our education system and the fact that he's very skillfully manipulating the lower tier of the society. But just to finish, what we need is a new person who is relatively less associated with the previous regime. Not Robert, not Serge, and not anybody closely associated with them. We need a new person who can solve practical questions, pragmatic questions. It could be a businessman. It could be a diplomat, someone who is not associated with them and has some track record of solving problems. And in terms of the tactics, the impeachment is not going to work. There's got to be some kind of a mobilization. That yes, people will need to take somehow to the streets. Mm-hmm. Someone will need to study the quote-unquote public opinion and understand what buttons they need to push to turn this around. Just like this guy manipulated the mob earlier. The new group will need to understand what buttons they can push. These people are very sensitive to money issues. Many of them I talked to, they would tell me, yes, we may lose Goris, we may lose Angazor, but there will be trade and there will be cheap Turkish goods. And that's an argument. You must understand that some people consider this a legitimate argument. Yes, we don't need to, whatever it takes. Who cares, who Karabakh belongs to? And literally, this is a quote from a supporter of this guy, someone who previously wanted to fight the war. And he's telling me, well, it doesn't matter who it belongs to now. We're just all going to live together now. The good thing is we're going to have money. We're going to have Turkish products. Trade is going to pick up. Who really cares? See, those are the kind of buttons you need to learn how to push. You need to know how to talk to these people, because I don't know how to tell someone that you can't sell your motherland for money. There will need to be people who can manipulate them. Just like he manipulated the society 4 years ago. So that's what I would say, a new person and a very skillful PR team, systematic study of his support base. That's what is needed. And in the diaspora, I think if there were, and I was fighting for this also, and nobody would listen. We are a unique group. We never listen to each other, and we never want to organize ourselves. Everybody wants to do his own thing. If there were a unified voice from the diaspora, that would also help. Some kind of organization that would make it very difficult for this regime to function in the diaspora, for these embassies and consulates to operate. But we don't even have unity in the diaspora.
We'll keep track of what's going on, and September 2 is going to be next week, so we'll figure out like how many people show up to that rally. But the next topic on our list, I guess, is another loss of part of our homeland, Berdzor and Aghavno, and basically part of the Berdzor corridor. On August 25, the last of the Armenians evacuated from Berdzor. It took less than a day for Azerbaijani armed units to demonstratively fill up those villages with military equipment end to end. I mean, just in that village of Aghavno, there must have been hundreds of vehicles. And of course, Azerbaijani flags raised, pictures of signs being torn down and so forth.
Soldiers taking selfies on top of their armored vehicles.
Yeah, and you know what? No one cares. Nobody cares.
No one cares.
Nobody. I bet you if you were in Armenia right now, you would be at the Cascade and people would be dancing and drinking wine and going on their Instagram accounts. It's a unique phenomenon. What we're seeing right now is unique.
Well, for the 843 subscribers of this podcast, I think they care. But let's
okay.
On YouTube. Okay. There are more actually. Okay, so there are more on other.
Mm-hmm.
But the Russian peacekeepers informed Armenians that they will fully move to the new Lachin corridor beginning September 1. I think that's an interesting terminology where they're saying basically they're moving the Lachin corridor. They're not, at least the Russians, at least when they talk, they recognize the new road as Lachin corridor. Obviously, the Azerbaijanis would disagree on that. But the new corridor, this new corridor itself is an interim one because it's going to include a 4-kilometer dirt road that goes to Aghavno. And I don't know what's going to happen when we drive by Aghavno and there are like these, Azeris stationed there. Then they're going to use this is going to be their barracks, basically. I think. So the permanent road will happen. For our listeners, the more permanent road apparently will be complete by March of next year or sometime early next year, the first half of next year. And by that time, then we will not use that area that Aghavno completely. So we will not even drive past it. It seems that the authorities in Armenia and Artsakh are either supportive or had already accepted the inevitability of losing Berdzor and Aghavno. Even the opposition, this is my own opinion, but even the opposition, despite issuing strong complaints, didn't seem to accept this as a life and death issue. There were no protests on August 25th from the main resistance movement. I feel that even in some segments of the opposition, there's an acceptance of the loss. Is there anything that could have been done since the end of the war, since 2020, that could have prevented this yet another piece of our homeland from being essentially overtly given over to our enemy?
Well, allegedly, this was a result of the agreement this person signed 2 years ago on November the 9th. What worries me is not just these 1 or 2 villages. What worries me is that until this day, we don't know for sure what else he signed and what else he promised. And he is a person who changes his mind several times a day. So it's very difficult to understand what he promised, what he signed, what the status of the Zangezur corridor will be. Will it be an extraterritorial corridor or not? And I've been asking this for 2 years, and there is no answer to it. And apparently it is going to be extraterritorial, which means it will not be part of Armenia. So you're going to have a stretch of land in southern Armenia that is not Armenia, it's Turkey. I think you need to understand this, that it will be officially under the Russian control, but it is under the Russian control by a Turkish-Russian agreement. So if Russia decides to hand it back to Armenia, Turkey may protest, because this is not what they agreed on. So you're talking about 2 or 3 villages, which is very painful to see, obviously, but we're going to lose a lot more than that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that fear is there for us all. But if you look at, so when you said you don't know what he has signed or he has promised, obviously the November 9-10 public agreement, or what has been shared so far, We don't know if there are any sort of secret appendices that have been shared or that have been signed, but at least what we're seeing since November 2020 has been basically verbal agreements, or things that he essentially promised and not signed, or if he has signed, those signed documents have not been shared. I just want to clarify that for our listeners. But
yes, that's the problem. We don't know what else he promised. You don't know what else he said.
I mean, the November 9 agreement definitely does reduce the status, the geopolitical status of the corridor to Armenia, even though, like, the Russian deputy prime minister in the past has said that this needs to be within the full sovereignty of the Republic of Armenia. So, I think that your fears may be more based on things like these verbal agreements that we keep sort of hearing about, and then our land being lost. But in that case, is that even legal? So is it legal that the Korys-Kapan highway was handed off based on verbal agreements? I think a future Armenian citizenry can claim that all of these arguments were illegal, although it might not make any difference because might makes right, as you say, in this case.
I think we need to realize that since February of this year, we live in a completely different world. This is a new world. Whatever remnants of the post-Cold War order were there, they're all gone. This is basically 1930s. There is no international law. There is no international regime. There is no world order. Everything is now decided by force. We have the West and the United States on the one side. We have Russia on the other. We have China. Those are the three centers of power, and things will be decided by power from now on. It's a dangerous world we live in, more dangerous than before. And sadly for us, like I said, Turkey is using the opportunity, just like it did 100 years ago in the 1920s, using this opportunity of the war, to a confrontation between the West and Russia, to gain whatever it can in the region, in Transcaucasus, in Central Asia, etc. So I would not really put my faith in international law or international norms. They're irrelevant. Turkey is still in northern Syria. I don't see anybody complaining. Turkey is bombing northern Iraq whenever it pleases. I don't see anybody complaining. The entire people, Kurdish people, is basically, most of them are considered terrorists. For some reason, the Western society has decided that the 35 million Kurds do not deserve any kind of rights or autonomy or independence, while Kosovo does. So I really would not, international law, as you see, especially from the Armenian experience, has always been an outcome of power relationships. Whenever it's somebody's interest, then we have a certain legal argument, and when it's not, it's not. We have just seen ethnic cleansing of part of Karabakh. Hadrut has been cleaned of Armenians, and I don't see anybody complaining. So I really, I think we should speak less of international rules, international norms, and all those fairy things.
Fairy tales.
Yes, these are fairy tales. Armenians should learn to stop talking about them. We're a very naive group. We keep hoping that some foreign governments are going to come and help us, that we can put our faith in ethics and morality, in international law. It did not help Western Armenians. The Congress of Berlin of 1878, if anybody wants to really study international law and realpolitik, I would look at 1878, when Western Armenia was promised the protection of European great powers and then was abandoned. And most of them didn't even recognize the genocide of the Armenian people. So we, of all people, should know what it means to be delusional and naive, and we should stop being naive. Turkey and Russia will decide whatever they please. If they decide that tomorrow Turkish observers will join the Russian observers on this corridor, they will, and no one is going to come and help us. And what makes me so angry is that there are still some people in Armenia who are hoping that France and the United States is going to come to their rescue. Mm-hmm. And it is just so sad that we still have people who think at the level of 10-year-old children. I think 10-year-old children actually would be smarter than that. I think this naivete, this lack of education, lack of sense of realism has led us to this disaster, because this war was provoked by this gang, by their constant provocative statements they made with regard to Azerbaijan, by destroying the relationship with Russia, which for better or for worse kept the situation under control under the previous regimes, by destroying the relationship with the West. They just made innumerable amount of mistakes. and no one even speaks of that.
Arthur, things are progressing forward, right? Major meetings on Artsakh seem to be in the works between Armenia and Azerbaijan in the coming weeks.
Right.
We talked about this last week also. There have been intensive contacts between Armenia and Azerbaijan in the lead up to some summits. This last week, for example, Pashinyan again called Putin, and they had the discussion about these things. The interesting thing that's going on right now is the flip-flopping between Moscow and Brussels. Both of these venues seem to be in play right now. So based on what we know, on August 30 and 31, the deputy prime ministers will be in Moscow for a trilateral meeting. And then Aliyev and Pashinyan apparently now are going to meet in Brussels. Initially, the Aliyev-Pashinyan meeting was scheduled for Moscow, but now it seems like at the last minute those plans have changed. For the Brussels meeting, Hikmet Hajiev, assistant to Ilham Aliyev, said that Azerbaijan hopes to reach an agreement with Armenia on establishing a committee that will draft a so-called, quote-unquote, peace agreement. The Armenian side has been silent on this. There's been, crickets. We know a little bit about what Azerbaijan wants to achieve in Brussels. What is the agenda of the meeting, do you think?
Azerbaijan has made it very clear that there is no such thing as Karabakh, that there is no such thing. And Armenians who live there will be just like regular citizens of Azerbaijan. So what you saw yesterday with all these cars entering the villages, those 2 or 3 villages, you will see that very soon in Stepanakert. The Azeri army will enter Stepanakert just like it entered these villages. For them, there is no Karabakh. They will insist on the corridor. They will insist on Armenia abandoning any and all claims to genocide. So you guys get ready. Well, it's not you guys, it's we guys.
Well, we guys, all of us, diaspora and republic.
Yeah, but what amazes me is the diaspora didn't manage to mobilize. That's one issue that mobilized the diaspora very quickly, but even here, we have failed. There are people here who still support this person. I don't know if we're going to be asked to dismantle the monument that was built in 1965, ironically, in communist Soviet Armenia. We built a memorial to the genocide victims. I don't know if we're going to have to dismantle it, or if we're going to have to give up even any mention of the genocide, because Turkey and Azerbaijan, they work in tandem. So if that is what is being discussed, then you can imagine what I think about it. And I think, again, we need to, any attempt by this loser to play off the West against Russia is going to have only one consequence, that our situation is going to get worse.
We will get stomped.
Yeah, because Russia knows very well that we have nowhere to go. We had the choice of either being a dignified, respected ally of Russia, which we were for previous 30 years, or to be the humiliated, forced ally of Russia that crawled back on its knees.
A colony.
And this is what happened to us, because we did not want to understand what international relations is about, what the dynamics of international power are. We insist on believing these fairy tales about Western support, Western intervention, Western values. And when we're being killed, 5,000 of our boys are killed, not a single Western organization condemned it. Not a single Western government condemned the fact that they were bringing in terrorists and mercenaries and using NATO technology to kill Armenians. Nobody condemned it. And we still continue to believe these fairy tales. We are going to pay a higher price for it until we understand that international relations, international politics is based on the relationships of power. Power, that is what Azerbaijan is using right now. When it says we have an iron fist, they're right. They're much smarter than we are. They deserve this victory because they were much smarter. We spent 30 years eating, drinking, dancing, and talking about history, talking about our past and behaving like an ethnic group, not like a state, like an ethnic group. We turned Armenia into an ethnic Disneyland. That's what we did. They used 30 years to build up their economy, to build their armed forces, to have, to develop very strong diplomacy with Russia and the West. We did everything wrong. Of course, we should have lost. Of course.
Do you know specifically why the Pashinyan and Aliyev meeting was rumored to be in Moscow and then suddenly it switched over to Brussels?
I don't know why. I think they're just playing this game. They get a phone call from either the US or from Europe, and they're given promises, and probably they're stupid enough to believe that, and they probably agree to move the meeting. Then they may get another call from Moscow saying, that's not what we think you should do.
Is this,
and
for
everybody
example,
should
what you were
deny it.
talking about when you were saying that if this guy Pashinyan thinks that he can balance Moscow versus the West,
He's
these are
stupid
games that
enough
we're
to
playing?
think that. I think he's
Yeah.
stupid enough to think that, because an emotional person with no education would probably think that. To balance
Yeah.
things, you need power. If you had a European army right now on the border of Armenia, if you had an American army, French army, if you had a commitment from France or the United States to protect Armenia's borders, yes, you could balance it. But there is no commitment, and there is no army, and there's no power.
And there can be no such
And there
commitments.
can
There's
no
not
such
even
thing.
there's not even wild dreams about those commitments among the Europeans. But
Well, when you say wild dreams, there are people who are sick enough to believe this, and their number is increasing, which is why I'm telling you, the root of all this tragedy is the dismantlement of our educational system, because we have a large number of completely ignorant and educated people. They march in front of the French embassy. You know that there is a group that rallies them. They go to the French embassy, they ask France for protection, like clowns. Then they walk to the Iranian embassy, and they ask Iran for protection. They go to the American embassy and ask Americans for protection. I can only imagine how much fun our opponents are having watching us. This is a mental hospital. This is a mental clinic. These people, they're embarrassing us. They keep asking France and the United States to come, and France and the United States repeatedly say that they have no interest to do that, and they have no commitment to defend Armenia. So in the end, all these games, the only thing you do, you aggravate Russia. And Russia made it very clear that we have nowhere to go. They said it openly. Armenians have nowhere to go. They should stop playing this game, because we know that they have nowhere to go.
Asbed, if I may just chime in on that question, I think that at least Aliyev himself would prefer Brussels, because I think Russia does not want a status of Artsakh finalized. Therefore, does not want a peace deal that would be which would undoubtedly include, I think, sort of recognition of Artsakh as part of Azerbaijan. And in fact, I think Aliyev, the only reason also I wanted to interject is that Aliyev, I think a few months ago in Shushi, in some conference, said that basically he believes that Brussels is an objective mediator. And I guess maybe the ball was in Pashinyan's court, and if Pashinyan agreed, then 2 out of 3, then I think, yes, that may have what caused the meeting to move to Brussels. But yes, it's from the perspective of Russia, it is Pashinyan who could have decided to either keep it in Russia or move it to Brussels.
Of course, this is also happening in the context of EU and Baku signing giant gas deals, right?
Right.
So I don't know how much of a neutral mediator they can be.
So this is going to be Berlin Congress 120 years later, and this time it's going to be the Karabakh Armenians who will be abandoned, not Western Armenians, but Karabakh Armenians. It's exactly the same thing. If there is an agreement signed in Brussels, who is going to guarantee it? Who is going to guarantee the security of Armenians who live in Karabakh? The Belgians, the Swedes, the Norwegians? Will they? Really? Will they stop an Azeri attack? Of course not. Of course not. We're going to have Srebrenica, a replay of Srebrenica and Žepa from 1995, Yugoslavia, where those poor Kosovars trusted the UN forces with their security, and they were murdered. It was brutally murdered by Milosevic and his generals. So let's say there's an agreement in Brussels. What's going to happen to the Russian peacekeeping force? They're going to say, all right, well, you reached an agreement. Great, enjoy. We're going to go back. What's going to happen to Armenians? Who's going to protect them? They're going to be gradually forced out. All of them are going to be forced out. If there's an agreement signed in Europe, who is going to guarantee it? That's the question. These games need to stop. We need to understand. I don't think this guy will ever understand, but we need to understand that in this region now, everything is decided by Russia and Turkey. We are basically in a sphere of influence where things are being decided by these two powers. And the West, all it can do is try to manipulate it from afar, or try to create an appearance of some kind of intervention. What happened to the Minsk group? There used to be a Minsk group. What happened? Where are they? They said that the use of force is unacceptable. Azerbaijan used force and ethnically cleansed Hadrut. Do we hear from the Minsk group?
Yeah, where's the repercussion to this?
Yeah, are there any statements condemning it? No. We need to stop. the diplomacy is largely, it's a game of power, of course, force, but it's also a game of deception. You cannot be naive. When you are in a diplomatic world, when you deal with international relations, you cannot be naive. And sadly, our people are very, very naive. And we just elected a group of people who have absolutely no education. What scares me even more is, what are they negotiating with Turkey? What are we going to have to give up? What are we going to have to give up next? We are disappearing. We're melting away.
I think it's interesting that you mentioned the Minsk group right now, because just over the last couple of days, the United States appointed Phil Rieker as its special rep to the South Caucasus and its co-chair to the OSCE Minsk group. The stated goal is to find a long-term political settlement to the Nagorno-Karabakh status issue. This did not please Azerbaijan, right? In addition, the US and France have turned down recent offers to visit Shushi. How do you explain this little bit of I think it's a bit of a game playing on Armenians' naivete, to be honest?
That's exactly what it is. The West had an ample opportunity to show that it did not accept the results of the war in 2020 if it wanted to. The West could have condemned Turkey for bringing mercenaries, or Azerbaijan for using forbidden weapons, illegal weapons, or ethnically cleansing parts of Karabakh. If they wanted to express their position, they could have done it. Right now, it's basically trying to lure Armenians away from a Moscow-Ankara negotiated settlement and have some kind of influence in this region. The aim of the West is to squeeze Russia out of the Caucasus and surrender Armenia to Turkey, just like they've done with Western Armenia, which we can't even say anymore. We are not even allowed to say Western Armenia or remember that there was such a thing, as you know, in America. So that's their goal, to push Russia out and surrender Armenians to Turkey. And we're going to find ourselves surrounded from all sides by Turkey and Azerbaijan. There's a 45-to-1 ratio in terms of population, economy, army. Every measurement you take, it's 45-to-1. We will very quickly disappear, especially since Aliyev says that Zangezur is part of historical Azerbaijan. He lays claims to Yerevan. So we were just, gradually going to melt away. That's what's going to happen. So these overtures, these games, it's not for those who are naive. And this guy, he thinks with his emotions. And this guy, he has one idea in the morning, he has another idea in the evening. One day he says, yes, I accept that I could have avoided 5,000 casualties, but they were necessary. Otherwise, I would have been declared a traitor. Mm-hmm. And then his followers repeat that. What is interesting is when he says these absurd things that would have landed him in prison in any normal country. If you admitted that, you would be in front of a court right now. But he keeps saying this, he keeps changing his opinions, and people keep supporting him and repeating these messages. So it really worries me that he can do even more damage. He can do a lot more damage in his negotiations with Turkey. There is a certain group in Armenia. These people sincerely believe that what's important is to get Russia out of Armenia. That's the important part. Whether or not we surrender to Turkey, it's okay. We can be part of Turkey. We can live with Turkey. Turks finally are our neighbors. We need to learn to live with them. Never mind the fact that they killed 1.5 million Armenians, and they haven't apologized, and they probably will do the same with the remaining 1.5 million. It doesn't matter. The important thing is to get Russians out.
Right.
It's either insanity.
That is the West's plan.
It is either insanity or a well-paid campaign sponsored by foreign organizations. So yeah, these games will end very badly for us. What we needed was a powerful, effective diplomacy that would keep a normal relationship with the West, not endanger a relationship with Moscow, because now you see who's calling the shots. This person not only made all sorts of anti-Russian statements, he also managed to insult Putin when he came to Armenia. You've seen the footage of Putin waiting in the front yard of some kind of a building where he's supposed to meet him.
On top of that, the protocol called for Khachikyan greeting him at the airport. So, many Khachikyan supporters and many anti-Russians, cheered when that happened. See what we can do. We can make
what we can do. Yes. Then Putin showed them very well who is the boss and who is going to crawl back to him when he needed him. Yeah. It was very humiliating. Mm-hmm. Again, it's the level of intellectual degeneration of the society that brought us to a place where people could even consider these kind of arguments. That yes, yeah, who cares? Karabakh can be part of Azerbaijan. We can be part of Turkey. It's better. We'll have money. We'll have Turkish goods. These arguments are repeated. There are people who believe them. This is what we have come to. 30 years of total degeneration.
Ever since the end of the war, Aliyev has been frequently, or at least regularly, saying that why does Armenia need an armed force now? We have resolved all our matters, and we have not seen anything in terms of what was the most critical thing that we needed. I think in terms of post-war activities, which is a dramatic resupply and reform of our armed forces based on the lessons learned from the war.
That's
important. We haven't seen anything. We haven't seen. So, and now there are reports that are circulating that there is a law. There is a proposed law that will allow those who do not wish to serve in the army to pay 24 million dram. I think it's like $50,000 or $60,000, and get out of that responsibility. Such alternatives to military service have been considered before, maybe, but Armenia has never been weaker than it is now since it's gained its independence. And proponents of this law say that it will provide extra budget for the armed forces. Do you think this is a wise decision, or is it even a reasonable thing to consider at this point in history?
First, like you said, we all expected that some conclusions would be drawn from the war and the army would be strengthened, and nothing like that happened. You can still see our soldiers dying. There is no protection. There's no defense against these drones. Nothing has been done. This government is pursuing a policy of appeasement, except we're not even England or France. We are not just going to lose a region or two. We're just going to disappear. What you're saying about Aliyev is right. He believes that we should not have an army. Tomorrow, he will decide that we should not even have a state, and they will make it happen. Right next door, we have 35 million Kurds who were not lucky enough to be handed statehood from Russia, like we were, twice, and twice we screwed it up, to be perfectly clear. So yes, we are one step away from becoming Kurds, from becoming an ethnic group without a state. We need to be very careful, and we need to be very clear about that. I think most people don't understand it. As for this law, it's just another step in destroying the army. To make this kind of money in Armenia, who can pay this kind of money in Armenia? An average salary is 200,000 drams. It's about $500 a month. Who is going to pay this kind of money? So it's for the rich kids.
Or people will happily take out a loan to do this.
So it's another step at discrediting the army, discrediting the military service. It's another step towards destruction. This is going to be very destructive for the morale. Instead of making sure that people can serve their country, they'll have the proper equipment to defend themselves, that the morale is high, that there's no hazing in the army. As you know, there's a lot of that. There's a lot of violence against fellow soldiers in the army. Against doing all these things that are logical, there's this random law being proposed that's going to make people go into debt to make their children avoid military service. I don't see how that's going to help the army or the Armenian nation or anybody. But again, I'm not surprised. Like I said, this is like a bad dream. The last 4 years are the worst bad dream that we've seen since last century. We honestly, like in Yerevan, when you meet friends, when you meet colleagues, you try to laugh, you try to be happy, but you can't, because everybody's spirit has been broken by this. We need to mobilize whomever we have in the diaspora who can still think clearly, and in Armenia, and this group needs to go, and we need a new leader, and we need a new movement, and we need a new strategy of development that is not ethnic kind of what I call this retro nationalism, when we kept talking about our past and being proud of our past and having absolutely no strategy for forward-looking development. That's what we need. We need progress. We need development. We need new leaders, just like Turkey did. Look at what Turkey did in the last 10, 20 years. They're a progressive country. They're a powerful country. They're incredible industry, economy. That they did everything right. We did everything wrong. There should be absolutely no surprise in what happened.
All right, let's wrap up our topics there. I'd like to ask you if you have a personal rant or statement that you'd like to make this week, Hovik.
Yeah, I thought I'd go with a regular reminder that it's been 2 years, or almost 2 years, since the capitulation of November 2020. And we still have hundreds of prisoners in Baku. We still have tens of people unaccounted for. At the same time, Pashinyan's government still hasn't published the full list of names of those who perished, those who are prisoners, and those who are lost. We can't even pay respect to our heroes properly since we don't know their names. They have the list. They know the names. What are they hiding by not publishing it?
Okay. All right. Thank you, Arthur. We're going to leave it there for today.
Right.
We appreciate your time for coming on the show, and we hope to talk to you again in the near future.
Thanks. Hopefully it will be in a more optimistic environment. We'll see. Thanks.
Yeah.
Take care.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Okay, that's the show. Stay in touch. We like to hear from our listeners. If you're not subscribed to our channels, please do so on YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, and on your favorite podcast platform. On behalf of everyone in the show, thanks for listening. We'll talk to you next week.